What's wrong with Ukraine? Many of you might have been asking these questions for like more than last 30 years. And I'm gonna try to answer this question by telling a short story. Year 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant was exploded. And in 5 years, 1999, the Soviet Union collapsed. And actually, that was the year I was born. The crisis of 90s, a hard time for those living in the ex-USSR. Our family lived for like $10 per week. Year 2008, first revolution, so-called Orange Revolution. Then 2014, Revolution of Dignity, and the start of the war. Year 2019, we had the coronavirus, as all the world. And actually year 2022, the full-scale war has started. If you see the sequence, the average gap of the events is like every 4-5 years, something is happening. And you might ask, what's wrong with Ukraine? And things really have changed on the 24th of February this year, when Russia basically started a war against Ukraine. My background is urban planner, and I used to have and still have an urban consultancy working with the strategies of the cities, with the urban activation, with the ways to support and strengthen the municipalities and the cities in Ukraine. However, my previous job was reacting towards the request of the client. It could be the international organization or municipality or private sector. However, everything has changed from the date of the invasion. Not only this has changed, but also the content, the context, the circumstances. So on the very first day, I should leave my job and should leave my home, should leave my friends and gather my family in a small car and go westwards Ukraine, having no idea what's going to happen next days, weeks, months. Going to the question of the conference, that is architecture now, near, and next. Not only the cities under the direct contact with the Russian troops were under the pressure. Actually, the cities in the West experienced a humongous rise of the population, like increasing 30-40% during 1 week. And the word precarity, which one of the speakers was new to use in everyday vocabulary, is the right term and description of what is going on right now in our country. Because what we are trying to do right now is to reimagine how Ukraine should be after the war, during the war. And it's quite uncertain, and the horizon of planning is very short. So we are sometimes going intuitively. However, not to continue this sequence of hazards or events in the future, we would like to think what could be done differently, because what we have been seeing, what my generation have been seeing during the last 31 years was actually being inserted in some certain dirty loop from which we couldn't get out. That's why we founded the initiative, which is right now an NGO called ReStart Ukraine, where various specialists, practitioners stepped in, thinking of not what is possible according to the legal framework, because legal framework is done to the peaceful times, and right now this is a challenge which should be addressed collaboratively and cross-sectorally. And that's why we are forming right now the approach we think is right to be afterwards discussed and possibly implemented. The point is that there's no need to actually recover as it used to be, because the things will not be the same anymore. But at the same time, the world is changing, even without the war in Ukraine. And those factors together will unfold after the war. So thinking ahead proactively, not only looking behind, is one of the key starting points we initiated our discussion, our thinking. And as well, the recovery after the war, because I believe it will be ended with the Ukrainian victory, is not only recovery of the war, it's also mitigating the post effects of coronavirus. It's also mitigating the effects of climate change. It's trying to figure out what's going on to happen from the economic, ecologic, secure point of view. But at the same time, we already know that the losses are more than $1 trillion. And what should we do? What should we do? And it's like we are now, and what should be near? The near should be the return of people. That's why we suggest the infrastructure of return, infrastructure of bringing people back and then sitting together, thinking how our long-term and medium-term future should look like. However, not trying to settle things down immediately and start working, enabling us to be more ambitious when the first post effects will be gone. So that's a question we are working with. And the number of challenges is massive. And we tried to figure out what would be the way for the first and most critical and most important reaction from our side, so that other actions could be actually plugged in and support and strengthen the process. So we formed 9 thematic clusters, which actually describe the short-term perspective, which is about actually depicting what has gone and what was going on the level of the country, of the region, of the settlements, basically collecting the data. Once we know exactly the status, we can react accordingly. Otherwise, we see only general phrases. The other one is the infrastructure of returning back. It's about thinking wisely on the level of the country, how we can bring 14 million of people, if not back home, but at least to the places where they would be able to spend like next 2-3 years before we will be able to provide places which are based on dignity principles. And then it's about clean. Here, opposing to Martin from Rotterdam, we don't have the luxury of making salvage materials as easy as their equivalent new products. We might have no new products on the short-term perspective, and we need to think how can we reduce the environmental impact and actually help people to build back their houses, to build back the hospitals, the schools. But of course, it's about predict, and it sounds very, very in line with what Rosaria was saying, that let's stop making action that is not aligned with the planet. Here we think like on the level of macro level of the country, how ecology has changed, how economy has changed, how demography has changed, and how spatial security has changed. So that gives us an idea how the new cities should rebuild, how they should look like. Because those cities along the border with Russia, should we guarantee the return of 100% of inhabitants? Would they like to come back there? And what would be the driver, the new driver of those places? It's quite a thing to think about. And then we also state that it's the recovery of Ukraine is not only rebuilding everything back, but it's also reestablishing the connection of the people with their neighborhoods. For instance, a person could have left their house on 24th, and right now it's a ruin. what would be the effect of this person coming back, and how to bring their life to at least half normal. And then, of course, the cities and the municipalities have some certain level of flexibility. So it's about readdressing the issues and the challenges of the urban planning inherited from the Soviet Union, where everything is centralized, where everything is personal car oriented. How do we match that with this financial support, and how do we actually start generating our own funds to invest in our country? And how do we ensure how the people participate on different levels in a meaningful way, not formally? Because right now what we see that the people are the power, that these new social links are the power. Why should we use them only in the case of the emergency? Why should not they be the fuel and the driver of the processes everywhere in a certain way? So what we believe is that a human-oriented city is the key driving principle for our country to recovery. In our project, we do three things. We collect the analytics on an open source platform with regards to these 9 clusters, with regards to post-war recovery, with regards to Ukrainian context. We do not copy-paste practices, we try to adapt them, saying this matches Ukraine because 1, 2, 3. Out of these 9 clusters, we try to build a renewal strategy, a renewal framework that the municipality can run through. Because due to the decentralized reform, the ministry will not give all the clear details for everyone what to do. So it would be a matter of mayor and local action group to act on the new reality. And with this platform, we help to imagine this reality within the broader context of Ukraine, of the Europe, of the world. And we try to visualize it with the pilot project we are doing now in one of the cities in the north of Ukraine. So the key principles are to be based on data, to produce solutions which are objective, related to a human, and related to the collective experience in the world. Because like Afina was saying, we should include many different practitioners if we want to design for this age. That's definitely what we do, combining practitioners to design our future, but not trying to think from our empirical knowledge what could be done according to our previous experience. And it's, of course, a two-side game, because it's not about world helping Ukraine. It's about Ukraine trying to go through this accelerator of developing cities and municipalities, which will be useful for the world. It's like going high-speed Formula One track, understanding which bolide is the best, and then applying that to the rest of the world, contextualizing that. And that's the way we bring the experts, the institutions to work with us, because we see the power in the ecosystem, not in certain experts saying how to do things. And in Ukraine, we don't see ourselves as a troublemaker. It's a certain cultural and historical way of doing things. We feel ourselves as creative disruptor. You can imagine Ukraine as a mix of Swedes with Italians. And yes, that's a short input from my side. And what's wrong with Ukraine? I think that everything is fine with Ukraine, because we are truly in the future that everyone is afraid of being in. It's going on right now.
First of all, thank you, Alexander, for that. And obviously, you're speaking to us from Ukraine, and we all really wish you, all your colleagues, and of course everybody there, all the best. And we hope that you are all as okay as is possible. I have to say, it's really remarkable that you are undertaking this effort already now, that you're able to sort of think beyond this calamity that is unfolding, as we speak. And I guess maybe the first question is just to ask, I mean, you've sort of outlined the overall framework of how you're thinking, but like where do you even start? Like how are you even gathering the data that you're working on now, and maybe what have been some of the challenges given that this conflict is happening in real time that you've confronted?
Well, the short answer is improvising, but the way we try to operate right now is to go very short sprints at once, analyzing the data we have, because already there is a number of international local organizations doing bits and pieces with regards to data collection and with regards to providing some certain shelter solutions. What we are able to do now is to actually map all those actions right now from one side and to look like from helicopter view from the top, what is missing, and to compare it with what was done before, and to see who could be able to provide the missing parts, and trying to establish the dialogue between these stakeholders. That is right now the way we work.
Great. Now, you mentioned also that you will be looking at how other places have rebuilt after conflict, and well, unfortunately, there are probably too many examples to choose from. Just earlier today, we had Lina Gottme, who talked a little bit about the situation in Beirut after the war there, to say nothing of more recent events. Here in Rotterdam, we, of course, are a city that was largely rebuilt after the destruction of World War II. I know that you had a talk last month with some of our colleague organizations here in Rotterdam about how we can assist in your efforts, and I hope that conversation continues. But in light of all this, like what are some of the strategies that you've looked at from other examples around the world, from other cities, places that have been so devastated by human-created conflict and violence?
Sure. There were several. We were looking closely at the different countries reacting after the Second World War. And there are some certain patterns similar to what we might experience, especially with the recovery phase when materials will be needed. So we will be searching some ways to import them to Ukraine. The other cases we were looking at were Balkans, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Afghanistan, from different perspectives, because like somewhere there are very different cultural and historical setup and context. However, we were even looking on the ways some certain countries react after tsunami or volcanic eruption. So there are some certain protocols from World Bank. However, what we try to do as local professionals, understanding the context, we try to adapt and to step in a very early dialogue with such organizations like as a World Bank, thinking how we can actually find this golden middle.
So what are some of the most urgent needs? I mean, you mentioned materials, but what else are some of the most immediate needs?
Apart from humanitarian response, I must say that already 6 million have returned from abroad to Ukraine, to their houses and to their neighborhoods. And right now, there is a certain kind of dilemma because the international funding organizations are unlikely to finance the recovery process until the war is over. However, the north of the Ukraine is already unoccupied and is being demined, and people are starting to get back to their houses, which are sometimes ruined. And in Ukraine, we have kind of cold winter, which starts more or less from October, and the funding from the national budget to the cities doesn't help to build the houses, to rebuild all the houses. It helped to rebuild the bridges, the roads, the critical infrastructure. So right now, it is a rush against the time to actually enter the winter phase, which is very soon, like in a few months, and to recover the technical facilities, basically.
We all noticed that part of your process revolves around this notion of remembering. I think just two weeks ago, the Ukrainian Ministry of Culture announced that I think it was 367 cultural war crimes had been committed so far, including the destruction of museums and libraries and theaters and so on and so forth. That's just in the cultural realm. But I'm wondering, to what extent are you sort of using documentation as part of your efforts? Or how are you documenting some of what's happening?
In the approach we are doing, we are rather linking to the specific organizations which are documenting, because the work load in this field is huge. So we rather focus on how can we actually provide the tools in order to make this work easier and to make it more kind of holistic way. So an example of what we are doing right now is together with one of the US organization called ARC, we build a tool which helps through the photos of the destroyed objects to recover their 3D model, which then can be replaced in the context of the city. Because for us, remember, it's not only about the official heritage, but it's about we call it 3 parts of remember. The first part is that we need to recover the mental memory of the person with the city, which is not always the heritage. It could be an object, an element. It could be a park. It could be a bus stop. That's when people come back, they are able to recognize their city. The other one is of course, the heritage part. And there is a number of organizations working on that. We're not going very deep there because it's not one of our best expertise. But what we try to do is the way to commemorate the war, because up to the Second World War, all our country was filled with some certain obelisks and memorial places which were always empty and were only for like 1 year event. However, here we should take an approach where we actually keep the objects as a part of memory destroyed in the city. That's why when the new generation comes, they will be aware of such war. Because living right now in Ukraine, we believe that recovering Ukraine, we should be getting ready for the next war, which is a very real thing, That's why we feel it, of course, recovering the heritage, but also planting some seeds that this war will be less likely to repeat, because the young generation would be aware of that, and the polemics would be kept on a certain way.
Great. Well, I'm so sorry we're out of time. But really, we've been talking a little bit today about optimism and whether it's even possible to be optimistic these days, and perhaps it's not in the broadest sense, or in an unqualified way at least. But it's really been inspiring to hear your optimism, the fact that even in the midst of what's happening right now, you are still able to think about the future, and well, not just the future, but also, but in particular, a better future. If anyone wants to find out more about Restart Ukraine, the website is restartukraine.io. And really, thank you, Alexander, for being here, and take care and good luck.
Thank you.